What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 102 of Nintendo Noise, Flip Screen Games' weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Steven Radford
Hello,
and
hello.
Miss Sierra Plus Ultra.
Sup? Hello.
Welcome back, gang.
Good to be here.
It's good to be
So-
back.
I'm going to address the elephant in the room, or the Mario elephant in the room right now, okay? Switch 2 rumors, baby. We're back. We're back.
Again. Again.
I feel like every episode since you came back from your hiatus, Sierra, aside from episode 100, has been, we got to switch 2 rumor.
Switch rumor.
We got some
Switch
switch 2
rumor.
It's time yet again, of course. And I'll tell you what, gang, the last couple, I tried to temper your expectations. We take it with a grain of salt. I got to tell you, I'm feeling pretty good about this one. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to break it down for you. We'll see how we feel about it. All right. This time around. But the story goes as it stands right now, that development kits for Nintendo's next gen console have been released to quote unquote key partner studios, and that there is a launch for the console planned for next year, according to Andy Robinson over at Video Games Chronicle. We got a couple pieces of very specific news, right? That are specific claims about the console. And then we got a couple hand waves about things that according to Andy, we have no information about yet, right? So what we do know is that according to multiple sources that claim to be familiar with the project, what we know is that Nintendo is looking to release the next gen wave during the second half of 2024. And the reasoning behind that release window specifically is to ensure that they have, as Andy puts it, quote unquote, ample stock available on day one, and to avoid the kind of shortages seen with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. So seemingly, right, this console should be ready to roll within the next couple months here. And the plan is to stockpile a large amount of them for launch so that there isn't artificial scarcity if there is high demand for the console.
That seems so anti-Nintendo. Like, they're like the kings of artificial scarcity. They invented it with the fucking amiibo, and now here they are, just being like, no, we don't want it this time around. And maybe
they're like
it's
not
the right
that
play.
much, right? Like, we want it to be scarce, but not that scarce. We want to be the ones controlling whether or not you can get it, not availability of parts.
And we did have that with the launch of the original Switch, because I remember all of the codes on the Switches themselves were meant to indicate which region it was going to go to. I remember looking my Switch up, and it had been diverted from, I think it was Asia to here in the UK, because it's got like a different letter code. And I couldn't get one on launch day. It took me like a few weeks of checking Reddit every single day to try and find one, to try and check out stock. And I imagine we'll still have the same issue with the Switch too, even with this stockpiling.
Yeah. I feel like any new console, you're going to run through a little of that, like if it's something that people actually want to get their hands on, they're going to fight to get it. And there are going to be folks who either, because they didn't put that extra effort in, right, or they just expected they'd be able to pick it up, that they're going to have to put a little extra effort in or wait, but I totally remember doing that with the Switch, where like I got mine on day one, and then I was just like kept my eye out whenever they were available, and were reaching out to people I knew needed one and be like, you want one? Here, passing on pre-orders and stuff.
Yeah, I made sure I got my order in, and then I passed it on to everyone else. Like, I was like, I'm getting my Switch in, and then I was just like, now it's fair game, you can go. Do you think this like means we might get a really big leak if they're stockpiling it in a warehouse somewhere, and it's in the supply chain, and these Switches are created, and like people are just gonna just take photos of the boxes or the actual hardware?
Yeah, they make it sound like they just blasted these kits out everywhere to a bunch of partners. Like, those must be some really strong NDAs. Like, I feel like we're probably, I don't know, something's gonna slip through the cracks within the next few months, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're probably right. The idea that, because I mean, like, just what, a week or two ago, we had the that Project Q leak, right? That like there are test models out in the wild now, and somebody breaks NDA, right? It
Well,
always
it's
happens.
usually in the supply chain. Like, it might not necessarily be from one of these partner studios, but someone who works in like Foxconn in China or something. They
Yeah, and just
don't
takes a
care.
picture of a box.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. I mean, I think between those two options, right? Like I think the idea that we might actually get a look at this thing sooner than later is probably pretty likely, especially if folks who are in the know are starting to talk about it a little bit. That makes you think that what it is probably already figured out. That we're moving more and more towards the actual development pipe or not development production pipeline rather than the development pipeline at this point, which is pretty exciting. And on the note of the NDAs of it all, right? What Another thing that Andy said is that although specific details, and this is a direct quote from Andy Robinson, although specific details on the console are being kept closely guarded, those VGC spoke to indicated that the next gen console would be able to be used in portable mode, similar to the Nintendo Switch. We also heard from two different sources that spoke with VGC that the console could launch with an LCD screen instead of the OLED screen that we've got on the new model, obviously, in order to bring down costs at launch. And part of that desire to bring down cost is because they said that there's going to be a need for increased storage due to the higher size of higher fidelity games, which I mean makes sense, right? Like the Switch launches with 32 gigs of internal memory, which is quite a bit less than the competition. So the idea
I've
that
Yeah.
always been surprised that they've never done a higher spec model because that module is like user replaceable. You can just take the thing out and put another one in. I always thought we were going to get like a 64 gig model or a 128 gig model, or when they move to the OLED, maybe we'd get like more storage there, but nothing.
yeah,
I think I'm okay with an LCD screen as long as it's like a high quality LCD panel because
yeah,
I feel like the original Switch and the Steam Deck, like the problem with those panels is they're a bit washed out. They don't have great contrast. The color rate reproduction's not necessarily really good. And I think a lot of people have been treated by that OLED screen. Going back from that to a crappy LCD rather than a high quality one would be a real step down.
I was
yeah,
gonna say I hate that. But the thing is, and what I imagine is like, I wonder if they kind of looked at like the sales of like the regular Switch versus the OLED, and they're like, well, like it's gonna keep production costs down if we only use LCDs on the next console. Not only that, but like look at how many more consumers just bought the regular one versus the OLED. Like people aren't gonna demand like
yeah.
masses of people are not gonna demand the OLED and the high specs at launch. At least they don't think.
Yeah, I
So,
think you're probably
I guess
right.
it's what the
I think
reasoning is.
the average person probably just doesn't care, and like it's to the average consumer, I think the cost savings versus higher fidelity screen that maybe you won't even notice is, I that makes sense to me. Yeah,
I know.
I'm totally with
Yeah.
you there.
I get why they're doing it, but it stinks for me.
This is the kind of thing where I wish that they would just have more options at launch, like kind of the way that PlayStation did this time around with like, hey, there's the discless or there's the disc version, right? If you want to save money, you can buy the discless console, right? And it's $50 cheaper or whatever it was. That's cool. Like I would be down to spend an extra $100 or whatever at launch if it meant I got an OLED screen, rather than
Yeah.
having to wait for the upgrade. And I
Yes.
get not wanting to have two SKUs, but like I wish that they would cater to those of us that are willing to plunk down a little extra for like the more premium model.
Yeah.
Problem is, I think it's not just two SKUs. It's going to be like five. You've got the new Switch, the original Switch. If they choose to keep that around, I can see that one they're getting rid of that one. The OLED, the Switch Lite, and I don't know if they're going to do like a Switch Lite 2, if they're going to keep that line going as
Maybe
well.
eventually. Yeah, I wouldn't think so at launch, but
Yeah, do they do they necessarily need a 2 like a sequel for the Switch Lite if it's just like the new Switch is also gonna have an LCD screen? I
I don't
wonder.
know. Like it depends on what it's going to play, right? Because I would imagine these new games that they're talking about that are potentially needing more storage than the 32 gig internal, they're likely going to be like 100 gigabytes a piece if it's anything like the Xbox or the PlayStation. You know, they've been. You're looking at Call of Duty's taking up like half of a Series S console at this point. It's like 200 gigs for Warzone. And if you're going to be getting Call of Duty on one of these consoles, which we know is coming, it's going to be taking up a hefty chunk of storage on one of these devices. And I know that they've said it's going to accept physical devices and a cartridge similar to the current Switch. You got to imagine those cartridge costs are going to go way, way up. Maybe we see more of the you have to download a portion of the game thing that we had early on in the Switch life cycle with third-party
Yeah.
games. All those games are going to cost $70 or $80 because those cartridges
I
are
mean,
not cheap to make.
Let's get out in front of it. The games are going to cost $70.
Yeah, they're going to be 70. Yeah.
Right? Like they
Yeah.
are. When Nintendo launches a new, like Tears of the Kingdom was already $70. The games are going to be $70, folks. You know, like let's not mince words on that.
Mhm.
With Tears of the Kingdom, I wanted to look up how big it was because I remember that it was like shockingly small, but it's 16 gigabytes. That is wild how much content is in that game in 16 gigabytes. But if we were going to try to go for like 4K assets, for example, that's going to...
They're 4 times the size.
Right.
You know, 4K is 4 times the size of 1080p. So presumably those assets are 4 times the size. So you're looking at potentially a 100 gigabyte game
Yeah.
for Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, that's rough. But it does beg the question of like, what are we looking at in terms of price here, right? Like if the internal memory does have to come up by say 4 times, right? Like, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, do you think we're able to hit the same price point we hit with the original Switch, and then the Switch proper just finally gets a price cut, or do you think it's going to have to be quite a bit more?
It's got to be more, right? They already put the price up for the OLED model, and that's already more expensive than a Series S. I would imagine they're going to be looking a little bit less than a PS5, which I think is retailing for $500 for the disc version. I could see them going for $400, $450 for this.
Yeah, that's what I
Think?
was gonna say.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because, like, I'm inclined to agree with you, but the, like, part of me wonders if they're crazy enough to sell it lower because they never had to take, like, think about it, right? For the entirety of the Switch generation, they sold it at a profit and never had to drop the price. Maybe like they return to the model of like you don't break even on the console, you break even on the first piece of software sold. And
I don't know about that. I don't
it's like,
see
think
that
about it.
I don't see that
Even
they
a
could do it.
$70 difference. That's a huge difference between 400 and 350. 350 feels a lot better
Yeah.
than 400 to, I think, most people.
One way I've always thought that they could do it, and this obviously does rely on some of the hardware staying similar to what we've got at the moment, is do people really need another dock and another cable and another AC adapter? Can I buy just the Switch, like 2 Switch Pro, like maybe even not with Joy-Cons, just the actual unit itself, and then I can bring my Joy-Cons over because presumably they're going to work, and I can put that into the dock I've already got because we know the dock works with the OLED model and they're backwards compatible.
I don't know though. I think that makes a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
And you could be right because, like, I think theoretically the idea that like the shape of the Switch is generally the same, it has a USB on the bottom and it has Joy-Cons is like sure, but like you gotta imagine that they're gonna make a Joy-Con 2.0 that tries to address drift, right? Like,
Well, and I think we've
Hopefully.
seen
hopefully
rumors before. And we had those rumors before that it was going to have like some new kind of input method,
Mhm.
whether that remains to be true or not. I would imagine there's going to be something there. But I'm thinking if you can use the dock you've got and you don't necessarily care about 4K,
Yeah.
and that can output 1080p, but then you pay $70 to $100 to get a new dock if you want to. There's a way they can reduce the initial
Yeah.
cost down, maybe to a similar price point of the Switch OLED at the moment, without you having to buy another dock that you've already got at home. You know, I've got 3 of these things in my house, and if I can't use them, they're kind of just like pointless. They're pointless bits of plastic.
I know. There's so many unanswered questions. Like we really just have to wait and see. Cause like I would agree with you, Pete, or like I would suspect maybe that like the Switch 2 comes out at like a price point of like the OLED and everything else gets bumped down. But like I don't know. We don't know like what are the new specs of the Switch? What are the new features? Like are they gonna be jerks and make it incompatible with the shit you already have. Like, there's so many different factors. So, like, I don't know. I would hope that like things can be recycled and like I won't have like a bunch of like docs collecting dust all over my house. Joy-Cons I'll never touch again. Like,
It's like I'm so
They've
glad I bought 6
traditionally-
sets of Joy-Cons that all dripped and I can't use them now.
yeah.
Apart from like a couple of transitions, I feel like they tried to keep backwards compatibility going, right? You could use a GameCube controller. You can still use a game controller all the way up to the Switch on some
Yeah.
games if you want
Right.
to, right? And the Wii remotes, they went from the Wii to the Wii U, and that was compatible, and you could play the Wii games with them. The GameCube controllers, you could play with that on the Wii. I kind of hope that even if there is a Joy-Con 2.0 and a new Pro controller, which I hope there is, I'd love to see analog triggers come into the mix this time around. That we can still use the old stuff if we want to,
Yeah.
even if that's only compatible with Switch 1 games and not the Switch 2 games, if there's some kind of functionality that it requires. In the same way, I can use a DualShock 4 with my PlayStation 5 if I want to, but I miss out on some of the new features. I miss out on the ability to use the adaptive triggers and the haptics and things like that.
Yeah. I think that would be cool. I guess it's I guess a lot of these questions really ultimately come down to like how much is changing, right? Like, is the form factor the same? Is there like additional functionality in the dock, like we talked about, that like has kind of like a 64DD, kind of thing where like it expands the RAM or it up reses or something like that? Like, those are, I think, such big questions, but provided that those things are all optional or they are like things that you only need to engage with whatever the, Switch 2 quote unquote software looks like, then maybe so. Which I think that kind of um not just backwards compatibility when it comes to software, but with like the hardware that you've acquired, I think that would go a long way in their stated goal of continuing the Switch life cycle and taking that install base and bringing them over to the new console, right? Because like not having to go and buy all your stuff brand new is a big way, I think, in a huge way to like make you feel incentivized to upgrade and not feel like you're pressing reset, you know?
Yeah.
So that actually takes me into a question that I do want to pull from the question block, because one of the uh, things that Andy specifically called out, right, in terms of what we don't know right now, is he says other details such as backwards compatibility, support for Switch games, physical and digital, remains unclear. And Nintendo did not respond to VGC's request for comment on the story. Although if they do, you can imagine what they'll say, right? Because they do not comment on speculation or rumors. But we did get a question here from Arciella over on the Discord, who wrote in and said, what are your deal breakers when it comes to a new Switch? For me, it would be a lack of backwards compatibility. So we're talking about backwards compatibility, right? That's one of the question marks we still have here. Arciella writes in with this question, and I guess my question for you before I hear your individual deal breakers is backwards compatibility a huge sticking point for you at the Switch? Because I think it is for most people, right? I think that
Yeah.
would be a really huge L if they were not to have your Nintendo account and everything you have in it come forward with you.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't buy it right away, at the very least.
I think it depends what game, doesn't it? Like if they launch with a new Pokemon title, you're not gonna pick it up.
That's the thing, right? Is to answer the question, I don't think there is a deal breaker for me ultimately if the software is attractive, right? At the end of the day, I don't like it, but I'm willing to put up with a lot of bullshit for good software. And as long as Nintendo is cranking out games like Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Odyssey and all that stuff, like I'm gonna show up. So like that's awful. I know that, like, no matter how many times they kick me, I know I'm gonna keep coming back. Like, it's just is what it is. But I feel like a lot of people would echo that statement, Sierra, right? Where like if that you can't bring your library over with you and you can't benefit from, the same kind of quality of life upgrades that, Steve and I we talked about so much at the launch of, the now current gen. I don't know what we call them these days, but the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, right? That was the big thing. in the early days. Like once you got through the few launch titles you were interested in, is like, damn, like I can go back and play this game from the Xbox, the original Xbox, and it runs at 60 FPS upscaled,
Yeah.
right? Or like I can jump into a game like Ghost of Tsushima that, like your dad just played that, Steve, right? He didn't get to it on the
Mhm.
PS4, and now he's playing it on PS5, and it runs like a brand new PS5 game. It looks like a brand new PS5 game. That's a huge benefit. And like if you are somebody that has that library, or there are some games that you miss that you want to get in and take advantage of the new hardware, like you're rewarded for doing that. And if the Switch 2 doesn't offer that same kind of continuity, I could see a lot of people feeling frustrated and having that mentality of like, I'll wait for the first big game, or I'll wait for X or Y series that I can't pass up, whether that's Pokemon, Metroid, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm with you both. The backwards compatibility, it would be a shame if it wasn't there. But Pete, like you, I would still buy one. I'd still want to play the next Zelda games. I think it would give me a bit of a knock to confidence, though. In the same way, I'd be like, "Oh, we're going into like another Wii U situation where this is going to be more expensive and isn't necessarily what people want, and they can't play their Switch library on this, and we're starting from ground zero again. Like, are we going to have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe version 2? Like, am I going to have to buy that game again for a
God,
third
no.
time on
No,
yet another
please.
console?
No.
Is there gonna need to be another Smash Bros that like brings over everything again? And it's like, oh, whereas I don't see it. I really think that they're gonna put the effort and the work in with their partners at Nvidia to overcome the technical challenge of transpiling the code from working on the original Switch system on a chip to the new Switch system on a chip, or the new console system on a chip. I think they're gonna make sure at least their first party titles run, and then the majority of third party titles, there might need to be some updates done if third party developers want to put that work in. But we had the report a few weeks back where we heard from the investor call that they're looking to use the Nintendo account in a meaningful way to aid the transition to the next console. And I
Right.
imagine part of that is bringing over Switch Online and all of those emulation games that you can bring, but also bringing your library with you, your friends list with you, bringing everything over. And I hope that I can still play with my friends that are on old Switches, on the original Switches, if I want to boot up Splatoon or boot up Mario Kart. I hope that all works together in like a cohesive way. I really think this new console is going to be part of the Switch family in the same way that the new 3DS
Yeah.
is part of the 3DS family.
It's so funny because like the stuff you're asking for is so reasonable. And it's just like I have that question of like, but like, are we dreaming too big with expecting to be able to just log in and have all our stuff
No.
come over? We're not, but it's like that doesn't mean it'll happen, which is so
Yeah.
ridiculous that like you can have that expectation, right? Whereas like I knew when I brought my PlayStation 5 in, right? I will log in using the same login. All my stuff will be there. I can go to my library and it's all the same games that have come with me. Like,
I mean, the Xbox was even better. I put all my
it's way
games
better.
onto an external hard drive. I plugged it into the new Xbox and I could play them from that external hard drive. It was amazing. It was like I don't need to re-download anything or reinstall anything. It's like I can just carry on where I left off. And I'd really hope that's going to be the same thing with the new Switch, where I open it up and my home screen has all of the icons of the apps and the games that I had on there before. All my save data is pulled down from the cloud. I can log into the new eShop and download all the same stuff. And I can shove a cartridge in the slot and be like, I'm going to boot up Tears of the Kingdom on this and see how that runs and see if I get it in 4K now.
So to take it back to the story itself, one of the reasons that I at the top I
We didn't
said,
answer
right?
the question, Pete. We
Oh,
didn't
I'm
answer
sorry.
what
What
was
are our
our
deal breakers? You're right. Go
what are
ahead.
our deal
I apologize.
breakers.
I
Oh,
gotta
true,
say, if
true,
I'm
true.
honest with myself, I don't think there is one for me, right? Like, I don't think I think the deal breaker for me is it's a bad console, right? Like it doesn't live up to expectations. It doesn't have the software that we need. It's yada. But like the idea of that happening feels so unlikely to me at this point, right? Because the idea of it ending up in a Wii U situation would like require there to be another console that they're supporting, and there just isn't, right? The idea that like they're going to take all the effort that they've put into making games for the Switch, and all those teams are going to move on to the new hardware, and it's going to be that seamless passing of the torch that we've come to expect from the other platform holders. I don't see how they fumble the bag. And like maybe I'm, knock on wood, right? Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but like what I'm looking for is genuinely more of the same. And that's a very easy thing to deliver on, right?
Literally, that's what everyone's been asking for years. Is more of the same, but more powerful and higher resolution, and that's all we need. And you just, make it so we can have more third-party games on here that are just easily ported from the other consoles. That's really what I think I want, because Nintendo are doing a great job with their first-party titles anyway. But I think Tears of the Kingdom is really the first one I'm just like, you know what, a little bit more power would be great. Like a little bit more of a boost, because you polish the hell out of this game, but there's still moments where like the frame rate stutters, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't detract from the game, it doesn't detract from my enjoyment of it. But it would be great to see that in 4K. It would be great to see that running at 60 FPS, like if I could. And like that's the kind of thing that I really want. I think my biggest deal breaker will probably be price. If they price this incorrectly, if they think this is more valuable than a PS5 or a Series X, I think that's where they go wrong. If this comes out as 550, it's 600. I think that's way too high for the console. I think it needs to be on par with the PS5 or cheaper, and I think ideally it needs to be cheaper if it's not as powerful as the PS5.
Like I think that's something that they've like locked down. Their last several consoles have been a few, like $100 or more less than the competition. I think they've seen that pays dividends.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that was the case with the Switch, right? When the Switch came out, we were mid-generation, so granted, it wasn't the launch price, but you could pick up like a PS4 Slim for like 150, 200. It wasn't an expensive console.
No. Not at that point. Maybe a little bit later, but I mean, compare it launch price, right? Launch price of the PS4 was 400. Switch was 3.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking at.
If they can do the same thing, if they launch this at 400 and the PS5's 5, I think that's absolutely fine. Especially with inflation and everything going up in price. I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Sure. And there's no doubt in my mind that games are going to go up in price. I could see them even pushing some games to be $80 at this point.
God, I hope not, but you might be right.
And yet the wages stagnate.
Here's the thing, Sierra. In just a few short years, Nintendo's going to have their premium fan, plus tier, where you'll be able to go work in the Nintendo salt mines in exchange for some gold coins on the eShop.
Oh yeah, and you can farm the microchips for them,
exactly.
Which will reduce 20% off your next Kirby swallows God and spits him out into the ocean. Dreamland 4.
People got second jobs for PS3s. You don't think they're going to do it for a Switch too? I think they will.
No, that's the thing is I won't need a second job because I'm going to go work in one of Nintendo's old school, like how back in the, I don't know if you know this about American history, Steve. It's very similar to serfdom, though. You guys had that over there, where we had the railroad towns and they'd give you fake railroad money and you could only use it at the railroad store. That's what I just need from Nintendo. I need them to hook me up with a gig where they can just give me Mario coin and I can only use it for Nintendo products.
You too can be Mario's whipping boy.
Exactly. I want to be one of the dredges of the Mushroom Kingdom. I'll be one of those toads working on fixing the castle in Mario Maker 2.
That's how you can earn your way to
with Toad at the Union Buster. So to bring it back to the news here, the thing that made this, I think, this story get as much traction, at least for me, is that after Andy reported on this, and obviously Andy Robinson over at VGC, pretty good track record of breaking stories, right? But then Tom Phillips over at Eurogamer, they did a write-up about VGC's report, and they actually corroborated at least the release window. The other information, they just reported on what Andy reported, but they did specifically say that Eurogamer sources also expect a launch window in the latter half of 2024 for the next Switch console, which will remain playable in a handheld configuration. So at the very least, we have multiple sources now corroborating the idea that a Switch successor is coming next back half of next year, and that it will be a Switch successor, right? It will be a hybrid console. So my question, right, as we move into our talking points here, is this the one? Is this the one, gang? We've had lots of Switch 2, Switch successors, Switch Pro, going back to the earliest days of Steve and I talking about Nintendo together. We've talked
I
about
know,
this
yeah, it's
story.
crazy.
Well, I think this is the third episode I've been on in a row where we've had Switch
So,
rumors.
Is this the one,
So-
Sierra? Is this the one? Does this feel real?
This tracks. I think latter half of 2024 because it'll be the holiday season.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it comes out in the summer, right? You get the Black Friday deals a couple months later.
Yeah.
Kids are out from school.
I
I'm
think
just-
it's a November target. That
Yeah.
always seems to be like a nice time to release consoles.
Sure.
Just get it out in the run up for the holiday season. That like mad rush where everyone's just like, "What do I get?"
Yeah, especially if they're trying to stockpile units for next year. Buy all the time you can because
Yeah.
it'll be a mad dash.
Plus, that gives them time to get everything they announced out. Maybe we see that Peach game on the current Switch, and that's the last title that we get on the current Switch, and then it's like everything's clear, decks are clear for the next console. Because I feel like they really laid all their cards on sale. I think we've probably got a few smaller things, and obviously there's going to be some third-party titles coming.
Like we know we
I
got
would
like the
imagine.
Luigi's Mansion thing.
Yeah.
You know.
So I think we'll probably see those come in, and then after that, it'll be right onto the new console. I don't know when we see an announcement for it though. Do we maybe see that at E3 next year, like during that time period? Because we had their big
That could
summer
be.
presentation again this year. It was like a week or two after the E3
That
season.
could be. They could reveal it in June, and then pre-orders go live after the reveal for it to come out like 6 months later, less than 6 months later, a couple months.
Yeah. I think like November time, I think it's ready for Christmas.
That's interesting. I could see that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. This feels right to me. You know, like I think that's everything we've been thinking in terms of this year feeling like kind of the last hurrah for the Switch, based, then adding all these other rumors on top of that. Like it just that feels like a window that makes sense to me. I this one feels like there's enough smoke where I want to believe the fire.
Yeah. I feel like we'll know for certain at around April time, when they do their year projections for next year. And if the earnings are just through the roof, then I think that's confirmation that a new console's coming because everyone's just going, well, why? What's
Yeah.
coming out? Because you've
'Cause-
announced nothing.
Switch sales are finally starting to slow down, right? Like it seems like Tears of the Kingdom was a kind of a final artificial balloon, and that it is kind of now reaching that natural trickle down. So, like, yeah, it seems like that makes sense, and that's I love that you've brought that into my lexicon, Steve, because that's something I definitely have started thinking about with my predictions now. Is like, when's that next quarterly projection?
Yeah, let's have a look.
What are they projecting? Because that's
Yeah.
we don't know.
Well, I mean,
That's
even
something.
like based on this week's Flip Screen Games podcast, which you should go check out, where we spoke about like rumors and like remakes and things. I remember seeing the Take Two numbers, right? And it was, oh, what are they going to announce? Kind of lines up with Red Dead remake, and like pushing that out, and it just like you got to look at those numbers because they really do tell stories.
Right, because I remember you brought that up in the context of that they had come out a couple months or weeks or whatever after we had done our predictions, and you're like, I don't know about that GTA 6 prediction, Pete. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I think they would think they were going to make a ton of money if that was coming out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're right. There you go. So you mentioned the thing about the Peach game being the last game on the console. I wanna pull a question here from the question block. This one comes from Left Eye Lazy over on the Discord, who wrote in and said, do you think Metroid Prime 4 takes the usual Legend of Zelda spot as the game that comes out for both generations, or is it simply never going to come out? So
I don't think so.
I think
it's a Mario game.
Here's the thing, though. What I think is interesting about this question is, does that mechanically work the same way now if it is more of a continuous generation thing? You know what I mean?
Yes, because they did the same thing with the OLED model and Metroid Dread, and they like kept that game for that kind of window, and it was a perfect launch title for that new console. Really showed off the screen and what that console did. I think it's got to be something like a Mario game. It's got to be a bigger title than a Metroid, in my eyes, anyway.
I saw you wind up there, Sierra. What do you think?
I want it to be Prime 4. I think that's a really, like, highly anticipated game. I mean, the original Switch launched with Breath of the Wild, which, like, I don't consider Zelda as big of an IP as Mario per se. So maybe
Sure.
that might feel in line with, like, what they did for the Switch launch, but I
That's a
would
good
not be
point.
surprised. I would not be surprised if it was a Mario game. I feel like, that's something
Yeah.
I've come to expect.
I feel like we're ready for an Odyssey 2, or
That's
even
a
if it's
thing.
Mario Kart 9. Like I could see that being a great launch title for them. And what if it's like an Animal Crossing? Like that game
Oh, come
I
sells
would
on.
so
cry.
No,
much.
dude. You're hyping yourself
Right
up
the
way too much.
wrongs of New Horizons.
New Horizon came out 3 years ago.
Yeah,
There's
3
no
years
way.
is a long time.
Okay, and how long was it between New Leaf and New Horizons? 10
I think it's
years?
different. I think it's different because I think you can take a lot of the same stuff. All of the stuff's there, right? You take that, you take it to a new setting, you put like a different spin on it in some way. I think there could be
Crazy.
something Animal Crossing related.
No way, dude. They only put out one a generation. If anything, it's
Happy
come
They
out.
Home
did, but
Designer
like you know,
2.
I think well, they only put out like one Zelda a generation. They only put out like one 3D Mario a generation. They only put out
Okay.
one.
So I'm sorry, and I want to let Sierra say what she was gonna say, but all you've done is prove my point. Because
Mhm.
first of all, they don't only put out one Zelda a generation. Going back to the very first console in which there was a 3D Zelda, there was two. There was
Mhm.
two on the N64, one on the two on the
Two on the
GameCube,
GameCube.
two on the Wii, one on Wii U, but we know why that
well,
happened.
just.
And then two on Switch. So in fact, there's been two
Mhm.
on almost every console. I don't know what you're talking about. And Mario, there's one exception to that, and it's
It's
Galaxy and Galaxy
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
So what are you
But
talking
I think
about?
Galaxy 2 could have just been DLC in another world. I don't know. I think I would like to see it. I think you're probably right. That Animal Crossing's off the table.
What were you gonna
But
say,
man,
Sierra?
like that would be so
I was
hype
gonna
if
say
it were.
bullshit. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want me to still. I was just gonna riff.
Go for it. Take the
Happy
mic
Home
from
Designer
this man.
2, but inflation has hit Smashville, and your challenge is to design a 500-foot studio apartment in the city. Based off of like fucking I'm out of ideas. But I'm out. The tank ran out mid-sentence.
All right, you know what? Steve, I almost want to take it back. Because the only time in the history of the franchise that there was this long of a gap was between New Leaf and New Horizons.
Well, we had like 2 on the Wii, right?
No, just City Folk.
Oh,
We had
okay.
Animal Crossing in 2001, Wild World on the DS in 05, City Folk on Wii in 08, New Leaf on 3DS in 2012. Then we have
Yeah, so that's
spin-offs.
4 years between most of them. So by the time
Yeah.
it comes out next year, it'll be 4 years.
If
and
it
I
were to
could
come
see
out
that
next year, yeah, that would kind of be shifting us back to the old release schedule.
Yeah, and it would just be to get you to buy a new console. Because like this is exclusive to the Switch too, and everyone's like, oh, "Fucking okay, I guess I'm buying one."
Yeah, I mean,
That's the exact expression though. Like anytime you're subject to some shit like that, like oh, okay,
whatever.
damn, you got
fine.
me.
Yeah,
what
you
if
know
it's
what?
a Pokemon as well? You know, like
make
if, like, any of these big titles that come out in the back
Yeah.
half of the year, it could be any of those things.
What's the last? I don't know. What the last game is going to be interesting because I wouldn't be surprised if Metroid was one of the last like big games, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there was similar to like what we got on the 3DS in like its last year or two, where it's like, yeah, like the 3DS is like dead, but like there's still games coming out on it, right? Like Persona Q and Hey Pikmin and whatever else. Like there's like
Luigi's Mansion 2 came out on it, like, after the
no,
death, right?
no, 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 no,
I'm sure it did.
no.
Or maybe it was the Luigi's Mansion remake
Remake of
or
one.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I was like, "Why is it coming out on the DX?"
yeah. Because
I was like, "Well, it's already way too down the pipeline."
2 came out, I think mid life cycle on that one.
Mhm.
Um,
But then we also got, like, the new I think it was the new, Mario and Luigi game, like, the Bowser's Story one
the
or whatever
last
it
one,
was.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't know, but I do think it'll come out. Don't worry about that, Matt. It's coming. I'm very interested if what Sierra said holds water, because I think that is a really interesting point. The idea that like Zelda, I feel like feels like it's like, oh yeah, like that's huge to launch with a Zelda game, but like Breath of the Wild kind of set a new standard for Zelda being a big seller, right? Like there are a very short number of Zelda games that are like big sellers besides the two most modern games. And like the idea that they could see that with Metroid Prime 4 of like they're like, "Hey, we know that Prime 4 is fire and people love Prime Remaster. Dread just kind of brought Metroid back. Like maybe this is our chance to turn Metroid into a 14 plus million seller the way that we turned Zelda into one." I wouldn't like
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think they've got the confidence in it in the same way they don't in Pikmin, you know? Like, Pikmin's
ah,
seemingly an amazing game. Everyone I've spoken to about Pikmin 4 absolutely loves it. It's got absolutely crazy reviews. I've seen it on billboards, but, like, they put it out at a terrible time. It seemed to have very little kind of marketing around it in the same way that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the
I
Kingdom
don't
had
think
a lot of
that's true.
marketing
No, no, no,
around it.
no. There was a ton of marketing for it.
Nowhere
They're
near the
not the
same
same
level
level
as
of
some of their
IP
big
though. Like
franchises. Yeah,
I don't
but that's
think
what I mean. I think if they wanted to make it to that next level, they need to put the investment in, and they're not willing to do it with something like Pikmin, which is like Miyamoto's baby.
I don't think that's
Are they
fair to say
willing to do
though.
it with
Like
Metroid?
go scroll down to the article I have for the Pikmin 4 conversation that we may or may not get to today. Uh it's Pikmin 4's first week of sales in Japan, right? Outsold the entire life to date first week sales of every other game combined. And a big part of that in Video Games Chronicles opinion is because there was a really strong marketing campaign, especially in Japan. They were putting the Pikmin 4
Yeah,
logo
but like
on
I didn't see this anywhere else,
sandwiches and
right?
stuff and,
Uh, yeah, I didn't see a Pikmin themed sandwich at my local Tesco's in the UK. Like this was very
yeah,
much a
but
Japan
yeah, but
only
dude, like
marketing
Nintendo
push.
historically underserves the UK, right? Like that's not where they're spending their advertising budget. I'm not saying
Yeah,
that they
okay,
didn't
but
put
like in America, did you see it, right?
no, but I'm not saying they put the same level of effort into that as Zelda, but like again, Metroid is bigger than Pikmin, right? Like at
I
least
will say,
name
I
recognition.
saw Kung Fu Tea's doing a Pikmin promotion where they have exclusive
There
Pikmin
you go.
drinks. I wanna try it so badly.
Yo,
Like,
you need
there's
to go
2.
get one. I need it. We need to make a short of this. You gotta go review these Pikmin teas for me.
You got it.
Tell me the best one.
Oh, I'll be in an area where I can access a Kung Fu Tea on Friday. So,
Do it
Is
up.
it
I
like
will keep
bubble
you
tea?
posted.
Like what is Kung Fu
Yeah,
tea?
boba. It's boba. Kung Fu Tea is
Okay,
like a
cool.
boba chain.
How many flavors they
Are they
got?
like
Is it just like red, yellow, and blue Pikmin, or do they have every Pikmin flavor?
It is, they only did 2
Okay. I
colors. I'll find it.
wonder which two.
do you get like boba pearls in there, or is it like little jellies like shaped like Pikmin things? That'd be really cool if it was.
They have little
So,
leaves on them.
it comes
Yeah.
with the cups have Pikmin on it, and,
Oh,
there's jelly on top. There's several varieties. It's on its way,
okay.
to the chat. So, you can get a slush or you can get punch. I'm gonna get punch.
Oh my gosh.
That's usually what I get.
I need one of
And,
these. I need one of these cups.
so it combines rose hip, papaya, guava, passion fruit, and pineapple, and it's topped with mango popping bubbles. So you can usually customize these further if you want. That's a lot of sugar, and it makes my heart go crazy. But
That is a lot. Oh my god, there's so many boba balls on top.
how do you fucking drink that?
Let me
But
see yeah, look at that. Look at that, Steve.
I always love with boba and bubble teas that they always show the like pearls and the jellies on top. They always sink. Like they never stay there. But
yeah,
I think
I
it's
feel like
so
it makes
funny how they like
more
show them as like
sense.
a mound on top all the time.
Yeah, I don't drink it like that.
I'm mixing them in, right? Come
Absolutely
on. I love it. So before we get into a couple more questions from the question block, I want to just, I guess, put a pin in the conversation around what we know here about this Switch successor. Based on what we've heard here, like, are y'all satisfied with this? Like, the idea that this is ostensibly slightly more powerful Switch, we're going down to an LCD screen, a little bit more native storage. Like, does that all feel good?
Yeah, especially with the confirmation that physical media still exists, because as I've mentioned many times on this show, it's still a lot cheaper in the UK to buy a physical copy of a game than a digital copy.
Were you worried about that?
Mhm.
Is that a thing you thought they might
Yeah,
not
I
do?
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really did think that, because if anyone's gonna do it, I think Nintendo's the one to go first. I mean, maybe PlayStation, but I really thought that we would have seen it from Nintendo.
I'm ready, but I'm not. I'm like suspending my belief. I like
I don't want to get hurt by
I
another
just-
rumor.
I wanted it so badly for Tears of the Kingdom. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
you can just take your time now. And cuz like, you know, uh I'm interested to see if backwards compatibility is going to be a thing. That and price will largely determine how quickly I rush to buy this. But I mean, we're all also content creators. I might be dumb if I don't get it anyway. Um, I, eh, I just, I really want to see how they are definitive. Like this is the sequel. This is why it's better. So, like, if it has the specs I want, great. If it doesn't, let's see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad it sounds like it's a true sequel, right? Like
Right.
there were the rumors that we were going to get that Switch Pro mid-gen, and maybe that got cancelled in favor of the OLED model. I'm glad that it's just like, no, we're going to have a fresh cut, and this is like, here's the break, and now it's the Switch 2. And I really hope they go with that name, because they could go with
Yeah.
something completely stupid.
I'd even be fine if they got a little cute with it. Like, if they wanted to do like a Super Switch, or like, Switch it at, like, not actually that, but something like that kind of naming convention.
They should have made one with 64 gigs of storage and called it the Switch 64, and they could have done
Sure.
like a cool logo. Like, it would have been great. There's so much they could have done.
But I genuinely think calling it the Switch 2 is the smartest thing.
The Switch
know?
X.
No, stop. Oh my God. We just need a little continuity. We just, I feel like we go Switch 1, Switch 2. It's easy. It's understandable. Everybody's with us.
I
We start getting
know.
cute with it. We call it X or some stupid shit like that. We're lost.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Nobody-
look at Xbox. No one knows what it is. Like, we went from Xbox to
Or like the
360
Wii
back
to the
to
Wii U.
one. Yeah, that
like
was
the
stupid.
whole like. I remember having a friend who was like a big gamer be like, "Oh, is
What's
it a new
this
console?"
accessory? Yeah, like, what's this
Yeah, like,
pad
is it
I
an
can buy for
add-on?
my Wii? Yeah, it's like, yeah,
Oh.
no.
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that. You aim at the 2, no questions. Very simple.
I think the problem with the 2 is, like, do they worry that, PlayStation's up to number 6 at this point on the next console, and 2 seems inferior? I feel like
don't think
that's
it
what
matters.
Xbox's reasoning was, but
I don't think people think of it that way.
no.
I don't think a
I mean,
consumer's
I'm
gonna
with
be
you,
like,
but
"Oh."
who knows what's in, like, marketing heads at Nintendo?
I guess. I don't know. The idea that someone's gonna be like, "Oh, the PlayStation 5, that's 3 numbers higher. I gotta buy that instead." It's like, I don't know. I think you're okay.
But that's seemingly why Xbox did it. That's why we got the 360 instead of the Xbox 2, because
Yeah.
PS3 versus Xbox 2 didn't sound as good, which is just stupid.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know. I think that seems silly, but Xbox's naming convention, that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
Speaking of topics for this podcast, we're going to jump into some questions in the question block in just a second here. But let me remind you that this episode of Nintendo Noise is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of August. For the very first time, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Zoe, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go and get your name read on the air, if you want to go and get the show early, if you want to go and get all kinds of good perks and goodies, you can go become a Patreon supporter and much more. by joining us over at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places we are all over the web. You can join our Discord. You can write into our email address. However you want to get involved, that's the place to go do it. If you want to write into the show, you want to join the community and keep the conversation rolling between episodes, or you want to just go say, hey, show your support, go click on it. That's how you can do it. Go click on some stuff. It's free to do. Helps us out a ton. Go and click on some stuff, and then you keep listening to the show. That's how it works. Okay, so guess what? We're back. I got some more questions for the question block. Y'all ready?
Yes.
I'm ready.
All right, this one comes from One Up Mango, who wrote in and said, what do you think the year one lineup for the next Nintendo console would and or should look like? I added that caveat at the end so that you can freely predict what you think Nintendo would do, and then also what games you wish would be there for year one. So it's a little bit like a mix of what do you think is realistic for year one, and then in a dream scenario, what do you want to see for year one? And let's keep that within reason, right? Like, obviously, a perfect launch year, there's a million, 10 out of 10, right?
Yeah, Animal Crossing's the launch title.
That could be year one.
nailed
I
it.
think you can pick one crazy launch title, and then you can pick here's what I think we'd want to do, right? Emulate the launch year of the Switch. So there's one big game at launch, 2 to 3, mid-tier games in the middle, right? Your Splatoon 2s, your Armses, your Kirby Star Allies, right? Those type of games. And then you got your one big game at the end of the year to bookend it, like your Mario Odyssey. I think that's roughly what we're looking at.
Wasn't Smash the big game year one, or was that year two?
That was year two,
wasn't it?
right? That was 2018.
Yeah. Man, that was another banger year.
Yeah. Kidding me? Because that was what? That was that. And then there was, I want to say, was Fire Emblem that same year? And then Pokemon and...
Yeah, we got Let's Go that year as well. The first Pokemon on the Switch.
Pretty good. So it's interesting to think about, because we know that there's a couple projects that we've heard exist, right? We know Metroid Prime 4 is an option. You got to imagine that there's another 3D Mario in development. You got to imagine Mario Kart 9's on the table. We know that there's supposed to be a Donkey Kong game in development, right? Any of those are things we know Princess Peach and Luigi's Mansion 2 remake are both slated for next year. Any of those could be, cross-release titles or something like that. I don't know. I feel like
there's got to be a good mix in there, right? We got a really good mix that first year. We got the RPG with Zelda. We got the platformer with Mario. We got the online multiplayer with Splatoon.
Mario Kart 8 came out that year too.
We also got some real... Yeah, and we also got some real indie darlings that came over that first year, and I think we need to have some of those come as well. I think Golf Story was one of the launch indie games on the Switch, and that was a massive success. It's a real shame Sports Story didn't live up to it, but I think if they could get something like that, imagine if Silk Song's one of the launch titles on the Switch, and we're able to play Hollow Knight Silk Song for the first time.
I could see Mina the Hollower being that game, the new IP from Yacht Club, the team behind Shovel Knight. That's their new game. It got kickstarted. They're pretty deep in development at this point. I could see that being one of those games that comes out first year or so on the new console. Everybody's hungry for new stuff. This awesome indie game from a storied developer, right? That could be a good matchup for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think 3D Mario's got to be there for me. It seems like we're not going to get another one on the current Switch. They've seemingly put all their cards on the table with what we're getting. We're getting a 2D Mario instead, and that's great. But I think a 3D Mario Odyssey 2, a sequel to that game, would really be a benefit. And I do think Mario Kart 9 would be a good launch window title.
I feel like that has to be one.
Yeah.
It's been
that's that big
over
one.
10 years since Deluxe, right? Come on.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, right? Because 8 still sells every single year. The numbers are constantly growing. Nothing's ever going to outpace it. It's ridiculous.
I wonder if they've even started working on that game, or did they just work on the DLC?
The DLC looks like it had been done, or I think it was rumored to have been done by the Mario Kart Tour team, right? There was a lot of the kart courses that got brought over from there. So they've got to have a team working on Mario Kart 9, at least in pre-pro. What does Mario Kart 9 look like? What does it do that's different to Mario Kart 8? How can we make this a meaningful sequel? Do we even need a sequel?
Mm.
Mario Party would be nice too, but that is a dream because they just like they come out so few and far between, and it's just like here's this weird collection of 3 or 4 boards from the N64 and some games, and you saw it coming out of nowhere. Or we've screwed up the economics of the game, like we did with Super Mario Party.
What do you think, Sierra? What's something you'd like to see on the first year?
Well, just to hammer home, Metroid Prime 4. Like, that needs to come out. Enough.
They did
I
announce
think
it at the very first Switch event, and we still have yet to see it, right?
yeah. A new Pokemon Legends game. This is like Dream, right? Like, this is what
yeah, whatever you want.
yeah, so within reason. Yeah, another like Pokemon Legends game or like a non-mainline game. But that's so like maybe not necessarily 2024, but the following year. What else?
I mean, it could be though, right? Because like,
yeah,
DLC's coming out this year. The idea that there'll be a new Pokemon game next year is not crazy.
I just wish they would. Yeah, I know it's not crazy.
I wish
I
wish
want them
they
to
would
stop
slow down.
rushing, but
If we're getting a
so
Legends game, where would
yeah.
you want it to be? Because I feel like I would love to see Johto. That
Johto
region
or
has so much
Hoenn.
history, you know.
Johto
Hoenn
or
would be
Hoenn for
interesting.
sure, and Hoenn where you like go into the caverns or like
Yeah.
in the undersea caves, shit like that. That would be really cool. What else? Mario 3D game. I mean, not that I want this, but like a new Call of Duty game releasing on the Switch and not just ported over.
I feel like getting Call of Duty
Yeah.
Warzone would be really cool.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
like Fortnite, we already got on Switch, right? The idea of like getting like, and I know that there's like a Call of Duty Warzone mobile, right? So it's like get that going, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that would resonate for sure with folks.
Yeah. I can't really think of anything else. Maybe we'll get another like Hyrule Warriors type game. I don't know.
I feel like I feel like I could
What
use
about
a new Fire
Persona?
Emblem.
Oh,
Persona, I could see.
that would be amazing.
I don't know because it's like I like P3 is coming, right? We know that's coming to Switch. I guess that could be.
I know, wasn't that not coming to Switch, P3?
Isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't coming to Switch.
Okay, so maybe that's why. I could
That
see
would be
that.
my guess, yeah.
I thought it was, but maybe I'm wrong there. But I was gonna say I feel like we could use a new Fire Emblem. Like I know we got Engaged this year, but Engage, like by all accounts, right, was like supposed to be this anniversary release. It is like I think like a smaller release, and I would like to see something that feels like more of a follow up to Three Houses. That feels more like the next proper game rather than like a re-release throwback, greatest hits type experience. And like it's been since 2018 since Three Houses. So I know we just got Engaged. We probably don't need another one next year, but I would love to see that.
But it's next year into 2025, right? Because if it's
Right.
launching back half of 2024, you've got like 12 months on that. It could be end of 2025 that you're looking at.
Which I would be cool with that. I feel like that would feel good.
Yeah, I could see that.
Aside from that, like it's tough because I feel like we've gotten so much, right? Like we've hit so many of.
That's why it's hard for me to come up with games. I'm like,
I mean, it's also the presumption that you've got backwards compatibility because if you don't, and there's no Smash Bros on the next Switch, then that needs to come over. Yeah.
Yeah. Then obviously in that scenario, like just re-release, shove everything on there.
Do a deluxe
I guess.
version of everything like you did with the Wii U versions.
This is a little bit of a pivot. Do you think we're gonna get a Smash next gen? Because I kind of feel like we're gonna do with Smash Ultimate what we did with Mario Kart 8 this gen, and just be like, "There's not a new one. Ultimate gets a re-release."
I wouldn't mind that because what else can you do? What else can you do with the meta at this point?
No, I don't know.
I mean, I like. I'm really not. I don't know if I'm the best person to have an opinion on this, but like, I don't see how the game can change from here. But
what if they added like new fighters onto like maybe it's a new DLC pass or like a deluxe version?
You could do
with,
that.
Like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, like definitely like a version of the game where we can load up more guys in there.
Or like add more stages. Like, there are certain stages that I don't think have still like most of the old stages have been brought over, but like shit like Poke Floats from Melee, like I don't think that ever
Yeah.
got added, right? Like you could go do stuff like
That is
that
true.
and
Yeah.
add
You
old
could,
content back rather than having to like make new stuff without Sakurai.
I
Yeah.
think you could jazz up the single player as well. No one seemed to really like the single player on
Yeah,
Ultimate. Do
sure.
something new there. Not that anyone
Or
really
like
plays
you
it.
could
That's not why you're buying Smash.
no, but you could bring back old game modes and stuff. Like,
Mhm.
you know, like I remember in our top 100 episode, Chewy was talking about that one single player mode from the 3DS version of Smash
Oh,
for
was it like the
Wii.
rush mode?
Yeah, like I could see them bringing stuff like that back where it's like we're reviving old content that didn't make the cut for Ultimate rather than like having to like meaningfully make something new that doesn't involve, you know, the godfather of Smash because you gotta hope he's finally done, right? And with that, it's like I feel like you just leave it for a while. Like there will inevitably be another Smash, but like it just feels like what do you do from here? Like let it sit for a minute, you know? I don't know. The only other things I can think of in terms of what I would really want to see, aside from just, you know, the next installment in the games that we're already like waiting for, is honestly like a new IP. I
Yeah, you
am
just forgot about
really
ARMS again, you know?
I'm really bummed that ARMS is the only effort they made this whole
Sorry.
generation to do a new IP that is like a proper, you know, AAA like Nintendo thing. Obviously they published, you know, littler games here or there, but like
I feel like Labo was a real meaningful attempt. It just didn't take
sure,
off.
but like that feels to me like a new IP in the same way that like Wii Fit does, which is like not to say
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter, but it's like it's not the same as like Splatoon, right? Where it was like, oh shit, Nintendo's making a new game. Like that's what I want when I'm saying I want a new IP. I want something like ARMS or Splatoon
Yeah.
or whatever, but I would love
I
for
mean, the
it to
problem
not
is that
be a
those
competitive
games.
game. I would love for them to make a new single player IP or something and like try something different, you know?
Yeah,
Or
when
bring
was the
back
last single player IP they did?
that was new?
Yeah. Was it back on like the GameCube with like an Animal Crossing?
Yeah, that
That's a
might
long
be.
time ago.
That might be. That seems crazy, but that might be it. At least that's actually a franchise, right? There
Yeah,
might be
like,
like a
you know,
one-off
Wii
thing that we're not
Sports, for
thinking.
example, but they never really kept that going. That was like a two-time thing at most.
Well,
I guess
Luigi's Got
that you could say that they've Switch Sports, so
yeah, they
maybe you
just
would
brought it
count
back.
that, yeah, so
But even so, right? Like, sure, that's you know, they
I
just
guess
brought it back.
there's the WarioWare games as well, maybe that is
Yeah.
after Animal Crossing. I'm sure there is some stuff, there's probably some stuff on the handhelds
The
that
fact
is
you can think this hard
obscure.
about it though, I think is like
It's pretty crazy, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they're very much on the multiplayer front. They've tried a few things, but
It would be
nothing
cool to
single
see
player.
them do something like that akin to, you know, like what PlayStation did with like Horizon, for example, right? Where it's like we're making an effort to build a new IP, right? Like that would be cool. You know, I would love to see some of the folks from EAD, right? Like work on something fresh and like, you know, maybe like have some of the new generation of talent that's there, right? Like come up with new IP in the same way that Miyamoto got to decades ago, you know? Um, don't get me wrong, like I love the way that they, you know, are able to come back to the well on stuff like Mario and Zelda and whatever, right? The franchises that we love for a reason, but it would be nice to see them try something fresh, but with their same, you know, that same focus and creativity. Pikmin might be. The other
Yeah,
2 games
Pikmin
you said
might
were
be. Yeah.
GameCube. But again, it's like it's GameCube, right? Like what was
Yeah,
the new
GameCube
thing
was
that
the
came
last
out
time.
on Wii or Wii
Well, you had
U?
Luigi's Mansion on GameCube as well, that was another
Yeah.
one.
And
There was
even
a
that
lot back on the GameCube era,
I
but nothing since.
and I guess if you're counting that, Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker would be a newer one because that's like a new but it's a spin-off, right? Like
That's a spin-off, yeah, of like a
mostly.
Mario, and it's also in the Mario world. It's like a Mario franchise, a Mario character that you know.
Right. So,
It's not like they made a new character up on a new world.
it would be cool to see that. Or if they were gonna do that to maybe go and grab a character that, like, has been retired or that, like, you know, do a Kid Icarus, game or
Let's do a
something.
tycoon game where I get to play as Tom Nook and I'm sending out all these loans and I'm being a big capitalist.
All right, and I want to close the show out on a question we got from Andrew Valentine over on the Discord. He said, "Pitch the worst case scenario for the new Nintendo hardware: a giant home console with no internal memory and a gimmicky controller, a 64DD style add-on for the existing Switch, a third Wii. Go nuts."
There's a giant hole in the middle of the console, and you can put it on your finger and spin it like a fidget spinner.
Every
And that's
game is like about spinning
yeah,
physics.
yeah. No, I think oh gosh.
I think the worst case realistic scenario for me is one of two things. It's either the Switch 2 has a big new gimmick and it's not good, and it's like similar to the Wii U, right? Where it was like the Wii was a meaningful gimmick where they were like, how can we change the way people interact with video games? We'll invent the motion controller. Whereas the Wii U very much felt like tablets are hot, right? Let's make a tablet console. And that obviously it didn't work, right? And it was like the innovation, the thought there was not there. It was like, what is the gimmick this time around rather than,
Yeah.
coming up with a gimmick to meet a goal. And that I think is realistic, right? I could see them shoving a ton of bullshit in this and being like, this is how we'll justify a new one. It does all this wacky shit. And it's like, I don't want that. None of us needed to do wacky shit. It's good enough, right?
I think they know that though, and I think they got that right with the marketing on the Switch. It was like,
Yeah.
this is what you want. It's the home console. You can just take anywhere. Here's
You can feel the
Skyrim on
ice
it.
cubes though, Steve.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then there was the IR sensor that's been used on like two things, Labo
Right.
and the 1-2 Switch game. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there is a gimmick there.
But I hope it's benign stuff like that. That's, we can live with that. I think the other thing, which is not realistic, especially considering we've heard that it's not, would be them deciding to go back to having two console SKUs. I think that would be a nightmare.
Oh, a home and a
decision.
handheld.
Yeah, that would be such a failure on their part, I think.
Well, I think also no backwards compatibility is a big no-no, but that's maybe more software side.
Yes.
Yeah. I think for me, a non-realistic worst case scenario is it's a cloud-only console and you have
Oh
to
my
always be
God.
connected to the internet,
Oh my
and
God.
that's how they get these games to look so good. That's why how it targets 4K. It's because everything's streamed down from Nintendo Switch Online, and maybe it's got like a SIM card in there that connects to 4G, so you can be always online everywhere, like the PlayStation Vita was meant to.
Clearly, what we need is to make Project Q. That's what Nintendo has realized.
Yeah, just give us an Android tablet. I'd be happy with it. Done.
Great. All right. Any final thoughts on this camel that we're building for the worst Nintendo console?
It should look like Homer's car. That's what it should be.
I
A Homer's
love
car.
that.
Steve, we need to design a console for the everyman.
Yeah, let's do
Can
it.
that be an episode we design our own console?
We'll hire an artist to like render like the stupidest idea we can come up with for a console.
Oh my God. Just describe it and let the person figure it out for artistic interpretations.
You know, one thing I really hope they'll do, though, I know they never, ever, ever will, is swap the goddamn A and B buttons around so they match every other console on the planet. Please.
Everyone else
please
should
swap
switch
them.
to match
No,
Nintendo.
no one else should switch.
They'll never do that. They will never consider that, Steve. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, if you guys want to write in and let us know what you think about these rumors, if you want to design your worst case successor, or if you want to tell us what you want to see on year one of Nintendo's Switch successor, right into the show. You can do that in a bunch of ways. Head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website. Come and join the Discord and keep the conversation rolling between episodes. You could get your question or comments read during the question block, just like a bunch of people did this week. And guess what? You could do that through the Discord or by writing into us on our email address. That's questions@flipscreen.games. Or, if you're over on YouTube, you want to drop us a comment over there. However you choose to get in touch, we'll do our best to read your comments on the air. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you involved in the show. So if you got an idea for a main topic or something like that, feel free to write in with that as well. And then, of course, while you're over there on flipscreen.games, go click on some stuff. We're all over the web. You could go become a Patreon supporter. Like I said, you could join the Discord, keep the conversation rolling. You could go check out some of our sister shows. We've been killing it on those shows lately. However you choose to get involved, check out the content or show your support. We greatly appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Nintendo Noise. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. She's been Sierra. We'll see you next week.